Yeah.
Make your title and your blurb and you're ready to go in December. Like, I think that's very achievable.
Agreed.
And that whole, like, something a little bitchy and
Yeah.
the video will be helpful in that too. Somebody else ready to work on it. Then all the
We're creating a pipeline of projects, implementing our complete streets policy, establishing strong collaborations with local and state agencies, and tapping into the unique funding opportunities and programs. The pipeline of bike and ped projects often starts with, did I lose the mic? Can you still hear me? Okay, all right, changed. We're creating this pipeline of projects, implementing our complete streets policy, establishing strong collaborations with local and state agencies, and tapping into those unique funding programs. So the beginning of that pipeline is our planning grant program, which has funded over 250 plans since the program started in 2004. The planning program will be expanded in 2023 to include more focus on multimodal connections to bike and ped infrastructure. We have also started our statewide planning initiatives, such as the Great Trails State Plan, which we released in August, that recommends trails and paths to connect the entire state. We're excited to partner with many of you in next year's Year of the Trail, which will celebrate our state's trails and collaborate on strategies to expand our trail network. We're also launching a new paved trails and sidewalk feasibility study program next month to take projects from the planning stage through the early stages of design and vetting. This will help local agencies refine their ideas to better prepare to seek funding for final design and construction. Through our complete streets policy, we are reviewing every project for multimodal needs and ensuring our facilities are designed to safely accommodate all road users. Just last year, NCDOT the multimodal division, integrated mobility, participated in the review of over 300 projects for multimodal needs in accordance with the complete streets policy. There are certainly still issues we need to work through, including maintenance in unincorporated areas, better long-range planning for complete streets, measuring the benefits of complete streets, but we're proud of the considerable progress and the support that we have enjoyed internally as we move toward this. Through local investments that strengthen collaboration and partnership, we're improving bike and ped safety and raising awareness about safe bicycle and pedestrian practices. I also want to draw your attention to the sidewalk projects in our state transportation improvement plan. We have $195 million in programmed bike and ped projects using funds such as TAP, STB, GDA, and CMAQ. They are locally administered projects, and they are not moving through construction at a rate we would like to see. For example, there are several projects added to the STIP as early as 2008 or earlier for construction in 2009 or earlier, which are not done. Our shared goal is more bike and ped infrastructure. We need to get these projects into the ground so we can all use them and enjoy them. We need to improve project delivery. I would encourage everyone to play a role in working with your local providers, your local governments, your MPOs, your RPOs, to identify these projects in your communities and encourage them to reach out to us. We're working on identifying what are the challenges that are causing that issue and how can we be part of the solution. So we stand ready to assist in any way. Imagine if we could get those $195 million worth of projects into the ground, what a difference it could make. Our Safe Routes to School program has funded many bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects near schools in the last several years, and more recently, non-infrastructure programs in several communities to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety. I'm pleased to announce that we will be issuing a new call for Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure funding in January to continue this successful program. Our bike helmet initiative continues to grow, with our 2022 program delivering nearly 20,000 helmets to over 250 organizations throughout the state. We'll be opening applications for our next round of bike helmet funding in January. Additionally, part of our winning strategy for multimodal funding is taking advantage of unique opportunities like federal discretionary grants through the new IIJA. In the past 3 years, the Integrated Mobility Division has won 9 federal discretionary grants, including 3 RAISE grants totaling over $40 million. 2 of those RAISE grants were for complete streets projects, one with the city of High Point and one with the towns of Rutherfordton and Spindale. I will tell you, we got 2 emails, one from the town of Spindale and one from the town of Rutherfordton. where they couldn't thank Ryan and his team enough for the help in putting together those grant applications and winning them on their first try. Their manager said this was game-changing for their communities. To have that level of investment coming into their multimodal network is going to change their community forever. And we're really appreciative of the leadership and the assistance that Ryan and the team are offering in this space. We are really good at identifying winning RAISE projects. Now, the secret is Ryan used to run the federal Tiger Grant program. So that is what predated RAISE, right? So he knows what they look for. So if you have a good local idea, you want to call Ryan and his team and have them vet the idea. That's how these two projects came to be. They called us up and said, we got these projects. Can we come talk to you about them? And Ryan looked at them and said, I think these are winning projects. Can we help you put together a winning grant? And we were able to do that and support these communities. So if you got a good idea, give us a buzz. The other RAISE Grant Award was for our Mobility Hub planning and preliminary engineering in 7 communities along the S-Line rail corridor. IMD recently submitted an application to the Reconnecting Communities program to plan improved access and mobility near US 29 in Greensboro, a corridor that was separated low-income, marginalized communities when it was constructed many years ago. Our team is also working with Brevard, Hendersonville, and the Pisgah National Forest on an application to the FHWA that would provide funding to complete construction of a trail there. Fingers crossed we can keep all this federal money coming into North Carolina. On the mobility hubs I mentioned, we know that a robust multimodal network connected by complete streets can be enhanced and the benefits will be maximized with innovative and inclusive transfer areas like mobility hubs where multiple modes and services seamlessly come together. We're using the S-Line RAISE grant to pilot the mobility hub concept in communities of all sizes with plans to expand the concept to other areas of the state. The mobility hub work on the S-Line is part of our broader push to complete the S-Line in partnership with rural and urban areas from Sanford to Norlina. When finished, the S-Line will enhance high-speed passenger rail in the Southeast, create improved connectivity between Raleigh and Richmond and Washington, D.C., and improve local access to jobs, healthcare, and education for North Carolinians. Quick check, who's rode the Piedmont or Carolinian between Charlotte and Raleigh and D.C.? Oh, I love it. This is a great group. So let me tell you, S-Line, if we win the S-Line, further continue to win the money we're winning, imagine it taking an hour less between Raleigh and Richmond. I mean, that is the kind of travel time savings we're talking about. Like when you build a highway, you talk about saving a minute or two. This is an hour of savings. We will get you between Raleigh and Charlotte faster on the train when this is done than you can do in your car. And with the mobility hubs, you'll have the opportunity to get off that train in a community like Henderson, North Carolina. And with the TOD grant that we won and the transit-oriented development we're doing with those communities, we're going to make sure they get the land use and zoning needed to have that kind of dense development where you can walk and bike as your last mile solution. It's incredibly exciting. Once we have all of the modes built out and the physical infrastructure in place that connects them through mobility hubs and complete streets, then we need to add technology like mobility as a service so that you can seamlessly and effortlessly plan, schedule, and pay for trips across your modes and jurisdictions. The last thing you want to do is buy that train ticket between Raleigh and DC and then get off the train and say, now what do I do, right? You want one ticket that says I want to go from the station to wherever I want to go to with one ticket. And you want to pay for it on your phone, like that's what we all do with Uber, right? We want it to be easy. We want it to be seamless. So when you get there, your ticket is already set for your transit finish or your scooter finish or your bike finish. So one ticket seamlessly and easily. Envision being able to use one phone application to plan, schedule, and pay for a door-to-door trip from Murphy to Manio, seamlessly connecting between local transit, intercity bus, passenger rail, bike share, and ferry service, and connect all the modes. It would be very exciting. IMD is a national leader in this space as they are developing a strategic mobility as a service roadmap for North Carolina. They already have won a grant from the Federal Transit Administration to start implementing that roadmap next year. Given our belief in the importance of mobility as a service, We recently joined other state DOTs and transit agencies in signing the Mobility Data Interoperability Principles to show our support for the data standards and principles needed to make this effort successful. As you can see, we're developing a transit system with innovative multimodal services, connected by complete streets, connected at mobility hubs, and facilitated by mobility as a service. We think this system will improve equity, eliminate disadvantage, and eliminate disparities and barriers that exist. There will be hurdles along the way, but with our strong partners and the ability to work together to execute this vision, we look forward to making great progress. I really want to thank all of you for having us here today and for your partnership. It does feel a lot like coming home, being able to be with you. You are wonderful advocates for BikeWalk NC. We can't thank you enough. Having external advocacy is an important part of the puzzle to making all of our shared vision come true, and we really appreciate that. Thanks.
There's a lot to unpack there, so make sure you take good notes and be ready for some questions a little later on. I want to test your mic there. Just tap on it, just make sure we're good to go, Mark.
Testing.
All right, great. Next up, Mark's going to begin with his comments, and then we'll follow up with question and answers. Mark.
Thank you, Terry. I want to thank Terry, Trish, the entire board of BikeWalk NC and the planning committee for this fantastic conference, and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Governor's Highway Safety Program and how this may fit into some of the solutions that we're addressing here. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I've got the best job in North Carolina. I'm essentially able to fund and work with programs and initiatives that can change the health outcomes for North Carolina citizens by changing their transportation behavior. Now, changing behavior is only a sliver of the answer to really making our vision of zero traffic deaths possible, but it's an important piece of that. It crosses so many different disciplines. There's transportation, obviously, but there's public health, there's recreation, there's public safety, there's insurance. There's so many different aspects to what my office can potentially do and touch. There's also limitations, frankly, to what we can do. We can only fund in that behavioral safety space. So, you know, our funding, which comes 98% from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, because everything in DC must have an acronym, is not, we cannot use that to build a sidewalk. We can't use that to work on built environment. We can only do those things which change behavior a lot, clearly, but limited. And I'm going to be honest with you. In previous years, the Governor's Highway Safety Program and other, I think it's safe to say other state highway safety offices, we hadn't paid a whole lot of attention to bike ped like we should. Our focus has been really on one type of intervention, and that's enforcement. You know, we change behavior by giving folks a lot of tickets. And that is a piece of it, but it's a small piece of it. And we've tried, since I've been there, I've tried to shift things a bit in terms of our focus. I've got a bit more of a public health background, frankly, than a transportation background. And so I really see things. I see traffic safety as a public health issue, and one that requires layers of protection, much as we talked about with COVID in 2020. And those layers of protection are going to need to be education, design, quality policies, safe practices, enforcement as needed, and other things. Bringing those things together, as we've seen, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a bit, as we've seen on a national level, I think is really going to be able to make a difference. And all of those things have to have equity as a clear piece of that. Since I was appointed to this position in 2017, we've worked really to broaden our approaches and to try to bring about the concept of a safe system. Let me tell you specifically some of the things we've done. One thing we've done, I think fairly new, we funded this organization to provide the North Carolina Bicycle-Friendly Driver Program, which has been very successful over the past couple of years in educating drivers about safe ways to interact with bicyclists and pedestrians, and funded the organization in other ways. We have a major Vision Zero initiative that we fund in North Carolina that started in 2017. At present, we have a very large grant with the UNC School of Public Health to provide support services to promulgate Vision Zero communities across the state and to work with those communities to create their own unique Vision Zero plans. Most of those plans heavily emphasize bicycle and pedestrian safety. Now, the umbrella project that we're funding includes monthly resource sharing meetings with Vision Zero communities, statewide Vision Zero task force, and also an extensive week-long Vision Zero Leadership Institute held in the summer in conjunction with the UNC School of Public Health. And several of you all here, I know because I've seen you at these meetings, are part of local Vision Zero efforts, if not in Pitt County, then in other counties as well. We also have an extensive Vision Zero website, which has quality data as up to date as can be about crash statistics in the state. At this point, we have 12 communities that are in the process of planning extensive Vision Zero plans. In many places, there's already been such things as funding that's been done through local bond referendums on Vision Zero, approval and support through the city council. So things are moving well in the Vision Zero space, but 12 is not enough. The good news is we're adding more Vision Zero communities every month. Also, we funded the town of Chapel Hill to continue its pedestrian safety program in conjunction with its own Vision Zero program. So Chapel Hill has created their Vision Zero plan, and we are helping fund those behavioral aspects of that. We are this year, Julie talked about the importance of having external partners supporting traffic safety issues. This year, we have partnered with the insurance industry to fund the North Carolina Association for Safe Transportation. What we expect will be a large nonprofit organization created to build community support and engagement for safe transportation across the state. We funded Walk Smart NC with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to address a unique problem that we're having in Raleigh, but also in other places, namely places in Raleigh. For those of you who live there or have been there, state government is very concentrated. And for pedestrians, going from building to building is very difficult for a variety of different reasons. We are working with state government to educate drivers, to educate pedestrians and others about safe practices, and also working with other players to do redesign as needed and as appropriate in that area. If this is successful, we feel like it can be transferred to other places, including but not limited to businesses that also have similar issues. We have education issues, obviously, that we're working through. Many of you attended our traffic safety conference that we held in Raleigh, and which not this coming year, but the next year will actually be here in Greenville. And many of you participated on panels. In the past, I'll be honest, they haven't been bike and ped focused as much as we'd like. That changed a bit this year by having a significant focus on safe system and the role of bike and ped in that. And many of you all were part of those trainings. And this year we expect to do a whole lot of online trainings as well on a variety of different issues, including those that I think would be of concern to many of you here. We're doing a great deal of distracted driving work. We're funding a project with Biden Health, where we're working with the Eastern North Carolina school systems to educate young people about the dangers of distracted driving practices. We also are doing that with SAD chapters across the state. So, you know, there's there's a lot of things that are being done, and we recognize, frankly, it's not enough. 2020 made things even worse in terms of our traffic safety numbers, and let's face it, they weren't that great before. So there's a lot for us to do, and there's no silver bullet. There are promising practices that we're seeing, though. Many of you have seen or are familiar with the National Road Safety Strategy that the U.S. Secretary of Transportation has put together. That really incorporates a great deal of safe system approaches. So the National Roadway Safety Strategy, we think, has those elements that we've been trying to preach in North Carolina around layers of protection, utilizes some of those, but does it in a far more efficient and appropriate way, I think, than we ever thought to do in my office prior to that. But we want to do more. And so I would encourage you, much as Julie mentioned, the good folks in Rutherfordton and Spindale have done, to vet potential projects with us. If you've got an idea for a project that we could fund and we could assist with that will help your community achieve its own Vision Zero goals, we want to hear about it. Our funding cycle generally starts in January with an application process with awards to be given the next federal fiscal year, which will start October 1. But that said, you've got a project that's off cycle, come talk to us, give us the specifics, and we'll do what we can to try to work in this space. We know there's no silver bullet. We've only got a small amount of funding compared to other spots in our Department of DOT. We've got the mandate to only work in the behavioral aspects of traffic safety. And we know that education, enforcement, and outreach is only going to get you so far, that there are other things that we've got to do. But these safe system approaches, I think, are going to bring about long-term approaches. We're committed to being part of that solution, and we're committed to being partners with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Julie. Sitting here listening, I'm going to have to tell a story. I'm going to take a personal privilege here. Many, many years ago, there's a couple of old souls in this room who've been around long enough. I see my friend Garrett up there. In Charlotte, we didn't have a bicycle advocacy group for 30 years or so. We didn't have a master bike plan. We didn't have any goal or vision for the community. So a couple of us got together and we created this group called Bikes. Well, as Mark said, there's acronyms everywhere. So after months and months of decision-making, conversation, we came up with an acronym for Bikes. So our group was the Bicyclists Initiating Kinder Environments and Safety. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it was a lot of brain work, but it was an important part of the conversation I wanted to share with you, because that group created our first staffer for the city of Charlotte for Bike Ped. It created our first opportunity to engage in Amtrak so that you can put your bike on the train for free and traveling in state on the Piedmont and Carolinian. It allowed an opportunity for the state to recognize a true great road state, a great trail state, a great bike state. And it's really led to a lot of conversations to improve safety and improve kindness. And Mark mentioned also our Friendly Driver program. And it really is a legacy of that initial group of bikes, in that we wanted to take a program for safety that changed the way we looked at safety, not to tell so much pedestrians and cyclists how to be safe, but to tell drivers how to be safe, to help drivers understand what the cyclists and pedestrians were communicating by their actions. We don't have blinkers on our bodies, but we do have hand signals, and we have actions that we take that communicate an intent and direction for cyclists, that indicate to the people behind us that we are doing things or need to do things. And that's really that part of the process for us, that we're so very proud of the partnership with NCDOT, with the Governor's Highway Safety Program and others that got us here. So thank you for letting me share that story of bicyclists initiating kinder environments and safety. It was a proud time and an important time for me personally, and I wanted to share that with you as a legacy conversation. So with that, I'll open it up for your stories and your questions that you may have. So did anybody, we'll go ahead and start right here.
Yeah, this is a simple question. How do you best get a pedestrian across the road? What is the current state-of-the-art crosswalks? Got some problems here in Greenville. I'd like to hear what the current wisdom in planning is for crosswalks, flashing signs, what you would be looking at.
So the question for those at home and online was how do we get across the road as pedestrians?
All right, so first thing I'm going to tell you is I'm not an engineer. So the question is a great question, but it's not the work I do. I'm going to look to our Integrated Mobility Division Director, who is an engineer. This is also not, DOT's 8,000 big, and so you've asked something that is not, what we do, but Ryan is always a great resource. Any thoughts, Ryan?
Well, certainly, I think it depends on the context. Number of factors. We have a team of staff that works in each project. To identify the risk, speed of vehicles, the crossing distance, number of factors. How do you choose the right set of countermeasures?
Could there be a link to design standards of elevating crosswalks, bridges for pedestrians, that's some resource that you recommend?
So the way that we do, as Ryan said, sort of determine the right solution for the problem is rooted in all kinds of national standards, AASHTO, NACTO. So a lot of national standards we use to evaluate a situation and what's the best solution for it. So I think if you'd like, if you give us some contact information, we'd be happy to follow up and connect you with the right people in the agency that perhaps the particular intersection you're thinking of, they'd be able to share with you some thoughts.
And I'll just take a personal point of personal privilege on this as the only state highway safety office director that I know of who's had personal experience being at the side of a road facing a F-1150 personal semi coming at me because a town did not comply with 32-year-old federal civil rights law and build a curb cut. I can tell you, this is an issue that's very important to me. In the past, many in our field, and I should not say many in transportation, but I'll say in the very narrow focus of state highway safety offices, we have seen not enough emphasis on this area. And we've seen, I think, more, again, I don't speak for all of DOT here. I'm speaking just for the state highway safety offices. Some of my colleagues in other states have looked more as this being an issue just of pedestrian education. And I don't view it that way. I view it as more of an issue to the degree education's needed. There's a driver education issue here. Clearly there's design, which is a bit out of our bailiwick, but I've got that personal experience, so I understand what your frustrations.
Just to follow up, it's a cultural thing here in North Carolina. You step off the curb in California, cars stop. In Maine, you step off the curb and cars stop if you're in the crosswalk. Here, we're dealing with the culture right here in Greenville, where cars rule. We've got a problem on 10th Street, a connector, put money on, but it divides the university campus. What is the best way to get our students across 10th Street. A couple intersections with flashing lights, yellow. Why aren't they red?
I will say that later today is a great session that you should be a part of about some of the safe system approaches that have been taken here in Pitt County to specifically address those issues. And there's been a model that's been that it involves the police department, involves the university officials, involves health officials to actually look at specific pedestrian and other safety issues in the city and be very specific about intersections and then come up with low-cost solutions to address that. That could be an education solution, that could be a design solution. I don't want to steal the thunder of your later presentation, but that is such a simple but effective way to potentially address these kinds of things that we're encouraging other communities to emulate that.
And I would add, you've identified a challenge that we've heard a lot across the state from all of the colleges and universities, right? So you've got major walking communities on a college campus, and typically the campus has a, often 4-lane, 45-mile-an-hour road, and on the other side of the apartments that the students are trying to get to. They don't always use crosswalks. They don't always make the best choices. I have a college kid right now, so, they're not always making the best choices, right? We send them off in the world and we say, make good choices, and they don't always. And so we've looked at a couple of these situations, and there's a couple of challenges. A couple of colleges have said, well, how about a raised elevated pedestrian crosswalk? They're expensive, so identifying funding that can be used for that within the federal laws and rules and regs. And often students don't use them, right? They take more steps. So you want to make sure you're implementing the right solution that people will use. So that you've identified for sure a challenge. It's one of the things we've kicked around doing a raise grant for, like, could we bundle a couple of these and maybe put together an interesting raise grant? There's another issue, like we've got one that we're looking at up at Elizabeth City State, and the topography there, right, is super flat. And so if you add elevators, you're adding expense. If you do ramps, you're going to have to start so far up. So every situation, requires a different solution. So know that it's an issue we've identified. It's something that, we're in a lot of conversations with the college campuses, with the cities, and always trying to figure out what's the right solution. How do we bring funding to it? So no, your frustration, I think, is shared across the state, and we are trying to figure out what the right solution is.
That's a great question. I'm going to ask you for a quick follow-up as well. So what we've described in this question about how do you cross the road, it's an incredibly complex answer. Is NCDOT doing anything to help explain or communicate how to find better solutions? Is it a state road, local road? Is it part of a project? Is it a need? Is it a risk? Is there anything NCDOT is doing now that can help municipalities transfer their solutions up the chain or across the water where it needs to get funding or engineering for?
It's a great question, Terry. And I'd say, step one is always your division engineer or their staff. So they're working closely with the communities on individual situations. One thing that our division engineers do great is look in the truck, and they'll come out and look at the situation with you and talk it through with you and try and understand, what are the challenges. We've got, I think, really super design folks. And then they'll call Ryan's shop, and they'll call our subject matter experts in pedestrian issues. And that's where they get together in that space, for example, like with a complete streets process, and evaluate each individual situation and what's the right solution for that need. So I'd say, first phone call can be your division engineer, second call can be to Ryan's shop, and get the right people at the table to have that conversation. Is Joe here? Is Joe Furstenberg here, Ryan? Oh, so he's a member of our team that's leading the implementation of the complete streets and doing a lot of those project analysis and overseeing the consultants doing those. So I'm sorry I can't show you him and direct you to go grab him. But Ryan can connect you with him because he is really in the weeds on each design and each project.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I got a question about what's a complete and how is that evolving? So I rode over here this morning and I didn't see any of those sites. That's on bike paths. Someone spent a bunch of money, bike lanes. Someone spent a bunch of money to make those lanes. No one's using it. I think is a good reason they don't feel safe because there's people driving 35, 45 miles an hour next to them. And I think it's pretty obvious that we could just as easily have had a protected two-way bike lane, same amount of space. So are we still content with these, little white stripes, or are we moving towards protected bike lanes in our definition? Where are we at?
It's a great question. So you started with complete streets. So the concept of complete streets is starting from the idea that we're building a transportation system and roads in that to move people and goods, not to move vehicles, right? So we start sort of from a different place than we've traditionally started. And so if you start from that place, you now start to look at who's using it, how are they using it, who do we think would use it if it were better, right? So often bike lanes don't actually connect to the places we want to go, right? They start and stop and don't get you where they need to go. They're in a space where they're not sufficiently separated where you don't feel safe. So that's where this complete streets policy has existed in our agency, I think since 2009. And when the new administration came in, we reviewed it and we did a survey of all of our partners and stakeholders. And what we heard was it wasn't being equally implemented across the state. Folks felt like we didn't have enough understanding of it across our agency and all our different spaces and places. It needed more specificity, it needed to be updated, and it was due to be updated. So we went about a process of updating it and really drilling into it to understand it at a nuanced level. One thing I've learned is engineers really like rules, right? Like they want to open a book and say, what is the rule in this space? And complete streets just doesn't have that level of like specificity and rules. I have a child who's in civil engineering now at NC State. I have another who wants to head that way. So it's really fun to sort of see it in my own children about, where's the guidebook? I'm like, well, but you're going to use your professional engineering discretion. And they're a little sort of uncomfortable in that space. So we're trying to give them more guidance and more specificity so that they can decide, and use their professional engineering determination for what is the right solution in that space. So we hopefully you've seen a lot of that work with the new policies, the new implementation guide, the 300 projects we've reviewed. We still have working groups going because we have to solve really challenging questions in this space, like, if we build a complete streets functionality, who's going to maintain it, right? The maintenance of it is really expensive and it needs to be done. So there are rules and regs that say if a tree falls down on it, somebody's got to get out there and move that tree. If it's got snow and ice on it, somebody's got to get out there and remove the snow and ice. So is that the local community that's going to take on that responsibility? In a city, there's actually law that says the city can transfer that liability to the adjoining property owner. And so you may not have known that, but if you're in a city, in incorporated city limits, and you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you bear that liability. You bear that responsibility. Hope y'all are honoring it. But when you get outside an incorporated area, which we know because cities are growing in density, these just outside in incorporated areas getting more dense, it's seeing more biking and walking. The law doesn't say who has that liability, who has that maintenance responsibility. So having a conversation with all of our partners, what's the role of DOT in that? Do we have the staff? Do we have the resources to take on a new responsibility? Or is that a county responsibility? Is that a landowner responsibility? So that we're working through is still some of those more complex issues. But that's to answer what a complete streets policy is. And now I've forgotten the second part of your question. I apologize.
No, what I want to know is we recognize those bike stripes on roads are often extremely limited value and kind of a waste of money. And that really what you should be doing is building protected lanes. And then you'll get 20 times the value for 1.1 times the amount of money. And if you folks recognize that,
sure. So I think there are places and spaces where a bike lane makes sense, right? Like you said, maybe at lower speed places. There are also spaces where there are protected bike lanes with bollards. And there are spaces where we've moved to a completely separated facility, like a multi-use path. So I think it again comes back to sort of assessing each situation, understanding the characteristics of the road, the users, the risk, and then, building the right facility for that.
Move on to the next question here.
Christian's got a
Mhm.
Have you overcome that when you presented it to us? Like, it is designed for more. One cost probably 10 times the value, but it's long term, not short term.
Mhm.
How do you, what's a good way to address it?
It's a great question. So there's limited money, right? We have to spend on transportation. And the way that we do it in the state and law is it's like a competition so that we can choose the projects that have the most return for the least amount of money. Which I think is, been a great step forward from how it used to be done. But when you have limited money, now you are asking those kinds of tough questions of people. So what I would say is, why not grow the pie? Right? So if there's more money, then maybe you don't have to ask those tougher questions. So there are simply not enough resources currently in the state of North Carolina to build the transportation system we all want and deserve. And that includes roads and trains and ferries and bikes and all of it. There is a major conversation happening right now across multiple associations about what are we going to do in the long run about transportation revenue. So we all know cars are moving from gas to electric. That is a major funding source for our transportation system in North Carolina, and it's not growing. It's in fact at some point, right, going to be shrinking. And so we need to be preparing our financial side to weather this change. And so, having conversations about, or is it going to be vehicle miles traveled? Is it, going to be one time sort of? I would encourage you to be a part of that conversation, because I think that problem you're identifying is only going to get worse if we don't make that pie bigger. And so if you think about one of the beauties I love about Complete Streets is every time we build a road project, we're evaluating it for complete streets. So we have the opportunity where it's defined as a need to build more of these functionalities. But if we're not building anything, if we're out of money, then we're not building anything. So I really think I'm all about growing the pie and making sure we've got the resources we need to build the system we want.
Bob, is there a way to get them to see long term rather than short? Because obviously the value is going to be big differences longer term, not the short term is going to cost more. ROI is going to be lower. So is there a way to help them, maybe even out of their term? Change that vision?
It's a great question. You just said out of their term. So elected officials, so I used to work for elected officials. I've always worked for elected officials. And certainly, infrastructure takes too long. We all know this, right? I want to cut a ribbon. Who doesn't want to cut a ribbon and see something to the end? But infrastructure takes a really long time. So I think that's a really great question. And so I'd say it's a lot about what I think Mr. Zipper said in response to the question about how do you get more political support? It's about establishing that vision in that community, and a vision that can outlast election cycles. Right, the city, the community, whomever it is, has to have a well understood and shared and built vision that becomes a part of the norm that we're working toward, for the multiple years it takes to put infrastructure in the ground. I'm sorry, Mark.
That's a great question or segue. We do have to have that political will that is beyond the election cycle. And there are some foundational policies that limit NCDOT's ability to do some of those things that we've just asked about, sidewalks and investment in returns, not just for vehicle mobility, but for all types of mobility. So there's some limitations at the policy level that really inhibit a lot of the work that NCDOT does on a project by project basis. So part of our work at BikeWalk North Carolina is to change the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation that will free up those dollars and opportunities. That was a delegated act by the General Assembly in 2013 that has an opportunity to incorporate Complete Streets deeper into the pipeline of projects, and hopefully not at the end of the project design space, to really have a return on investment for active mobility and a Complete Streets profile for those projects that are in the pipeline.
I guess I'm asking to change that formula so it shows like this is a more desirable place to live for people moving to the community, stay in the community. Do we change the formula as far as what the value is?
Certainly, we would love to follow along several states in the nation that are trying to codify complete streets to make it a law for the state to include active mobility in all transportation projects. Where I don't think we're at that point for the political feasibility in this election cycle, but it is a long-term goal to move that complete streets policy to a higher codification for North Carolina. KT.
But getting back to the traffic safety state policies, is there a mechanism within, just use an example, but to ask my question, it'd be better off to give you an example of what I'm talking about. I think it makes it clearer. But within NCDOT, to look at their own policies, about, what mechanisms to take that maybe they're not being consistent with. And the example I'm talking about, NCDOT went into a safety project, which is, admirable, but it's focused more towards motor vehicle safety, which they block intersections where you can't keep straight through, but you can have to go down and make a U-turn and come back. And sometimes they're called super streets and such as that. And what I've discovered is, I can show you one example where NCDOT did that, but they left gaps in the barricades so that bicycles could go back and forth on each side of the lane, which provided a bicycle with a little refuge going across the highway. But literally within 25 miles of here, I could take you to any number of these projects which did not leave a gap. So now that forces cyclists to get on basically 6 lanes, 2 lanes each direction and a turn lane to make the U-turn, but looking for traffic which is behind them instead of just to their side. But I mean, I feel like the super street idea is very good safety-wise, but the way it's implemented is really creating a bad situation for cyclists in particular, unless those gaps are put in. So is there any mechanism that the state can be consistent? Include that as routine when they create these barricades?
So I'll definitely have Ryan, follow up on sort of what the policy question is there and to see how it's implemented. But I think what you're identifying is what we found in Complete Streets, this idea that solutions weren't being used uniformly across the state. As an agency that's geographically based across the state with 8,000 people, that is an effective communication, education, all of those tools are difficult. And so that is part of why we built this IMD team, is to be more of a subject matter expert to those division engineers so that they'll reach out to us on issues such as that when they're doing a project. I think with the uniformity we've done with Complete Streets and building it into future construction projects, I think we're going to see those solutions much more strongly going forward, because we are reviewing all those projects and we're looking at them with this lens. But know that we also have a strategy about how to work more effectively with our partners in the Division of Highways. So there have been a number of internal changes in the structure of the agency to better integrate what we do as the modes with our Division of Highway folks. And I think that's better than it's ever been before. So I do believe you're going to see more solutions such as what you're describing coming out of our construction projects, but I'm also going to take your specific question back and look into it.
We're running out of time for lunch. If we want to take one more quick one, if it's a quick one, you get.
Yeah, I'll try to be really quick. Okay, remember when everybody smoked everywhere, and now, like, you would never imagine you couldn't go into a bar and have a drink and smoke. So I'm trying to think, this is the same way with vehicles are meant for roads only, but now we're trying to move people and goods on vehicles. How do we change the cultural mindset like they've done in Amsterdam? And does NCDOT just have engineers that think with their left brain, or are there right-brain people at NCDOT that work on changing the culture?
Well, it's 8,000 people, so we've counted the number of left brain people, and we're in double digits now, which is good.
Well done, Mark.
I tell people I have a barely earned bachelor's degree in poli-sci, so I was able to get a job there, so I was very fortunate. It's traffic safety culture. Changing any kind of culture is very difficult. But if we know the history of Vision Zero, if we know the history of some of these Scandinavian countries that have successfully done that, it was the public action, the public organizations, the public outcry that really was the opening shot in making these areas as safe as they are. You know, when they feel the heat, they see the light, is one of my favorite phrases related to politicians. And it's organizations like this one, it's organizations like others that we've tried to be involved with, and in the case of one, tried to create, to try to be that outside force that's going to help change that traffic safety culture. It's not going to be overnight, but it's going to be through advocacy from you all. It's not, frankly, going to come from the inside. It's got to come from the outside, and then that permeates and changes the way all kinds of institutions react regarding traffic safety. I know that's a broad answer to your question.
That's a great way to phrase that, in that, you know, when we start changing culture, the Governor's Highway Safety Program is about that culture-oriented messaging. And their work, you did mention it earlier, but their work with the Child Fatality Task Force is an important one as well, because we understand that this affects everybody in the community, not just certain parts, old or young or male or female, foreign or domestic. It affects everybody, because everybody has to get somewhere, be somewhere, to live, thrive, and survive. So I want to thank our panelists today. Thanks for the great questions. DOT is out there tabling as well, so feel free to grab these folks throughout the conference. So right now we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. And sure, Trish is going to come up here and give the directions of how you can fill your belly.
How you can eat. You all, thank you so much for being here. And Villa Verde is our amazing local caterer, and they have just gone above and beyond to make this day as comfortable for us as possible, including ample coffee. So cheers to that. I wanted to give you all a little bit of guidance on how lunch is going to go. So we're going to eat. The line is going to be set up to get your lunch directly from this room. So that's going to be the line. So if you would like to go and grab a seat first, feel free to do so. But the line is actually going to be starting directly as you leave the room. So if that makes sense, and then going down the serving line. We will have just open free time between now and 12:30 just to get settled. And then our wonderful keynote speaker will be coming on at 12. Sorry, I think I got 12 to 12:45. And then at 12:45 to 1, we have a little bit of an opportunity to transition. And then at 1, we have 2 active sessions. We have 2 different active sessions that you can do. One is going to be the amazing Greenville Safety Task Force, led by Ellen Walston, and Sergeant Mike Ross is going to do a walking tour of some of their safety installations. They've received national recognition. A lot of Vision Zero colleagues know about them. So they're going to be leading a walking tour. And then we will also have our DOT colleagues and our UNC colleagues facilitate a conversation about Safe Routes to School program in the main eating area. So just wanted to kind of give those details before we break. And yeah. Yeah, sorry, 12 o'clock. 12, it's almost 11:30 now. You have till 12, and then speaker will start at noon. Thanks, you all. Yes. How was it?
So we follow the ferry how those guys Cedar Island. But, and even the guys that are patterns to overcoat, they're just amazing what they have to go through to get.
It was just.
Any idea where you want to start?